Okay, so we're here about 200 meters on the British side of the front lines, roughly at the start point of Daredevil. Before we go any further about what actually happened on the day, I just want to make a few points clear about the ground around us. Today you see these fantastic farmers' fields, French farmers' fields, and the Daredevil wood over there, but in the day it wasn't like this at all. It was all just bare earth. If you were lucky as an infantryman, you had grass under your feet. If you weren't lucky as an infantryman, you were sitting in a shell hole, and if you were really unlucky, you were sitting in a shell hole full of rainwater. Daredevil wood over there, back in the day, we wouldn't have seen any trees at all. A few weeks before, it had been retaken from the Germans, and during the artillery barrage that took place then, all the trees were just flattened and destroyed, and where you now see Daredevil wood, it was just a complete shell-holed place with mangled tree stumps. And what I'll actually do in the end video, I'll show you a couple of photographs so you can get your own idea of what it was like. As a side note, Daredevil wood today, the wood itself is part of a commemorative monument to South African forces. They've actually restored it back into how it was before the First World War. So, as I said before, behind me on the skyline is the British front line, and if the camera pans across to the other side over my left shoulder, you will see a red car, and that car is actually is parked on the Longefol-Ginchy Road, and just the other side of that road was where the British frontline trench was, and that was called Pilsner Trench, by the way. So here we are in the ground. You can't actually see the German trenches, which is good for Daredevil where he now is. So Daredevil was parked up here in the dead ground, and at 5:15 he started his run. So let's talk about what happened then. Alright, just imagine it now. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. Daredevil sitting here. Just imagine what it's going to be like for the crew now. They spent the last 2 days travelling 10 miles from the railhead to get to this point, and it's pre-dawn light. They've trained for this for weeks, and now they're at the point to get going. Perhaps 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes before they were due to advance across the British lines, Harold would have given the crew the order to start the engine. So Alfred and 4 guys in the back would have started it up, and then they would have done all their checks, make sure it's not leaking, make sure it sounds alright, all the lubrications that you can do inside. The gearsmen would have done the gearboxes at the back. The gunners would have checked their guns again, make sure they're all oiled up, check that all the ammunition is where it should be at hand, ready for when they need it. And then at about 5:15, 5 minutes later than planned, Harold would have given the crew the order to advance. In the pre-dawn light, the tank would have advanced with a plume of smoke out the back, and Alfred, the driver, would have followed a white tape that was laid out on the ground roughly towards the direction of that pylon that you see behind me there over my right shoulder. That tape was there so that they could move forward and actually cross the British lines at a safe place, so they didn't get in the way of the British infantry that were waiting there for them to follow them on once they'd gone across into no man's land. Okay, so we've now moved up to the British front. As you can see through the camera, we've now moved up to the British front line position. Just to the right, as you look at it on the road, that would be where the British front line trench would be. Daredevil would have crossed this line, and just look at the view that he would have had as the tank drove forward into no man's land. He would have had an overview of the lie of the ground that they had to move across. However, it was still quite dark, and there would still be smoke coming down from the artillery barrage, so they had to have the wits about them. Harold and Albert in the front will be watching out for shell holes or other ground in front of them that would cause the tank to stop, and Albert will be steering the tank together with Ewart and Harry, the gearsman, in the back as they move forward. What they didn't know at the time was the other tank that was supposed to help them by coming in from the north, Dolphin, hadn't even made the start line. He got ditched, moving to the start line, and he would actually take no further part in this particular phase of the battle. So as far as taking the trenches at this particular section is concerned, Daredevil was on its own with the infantry. So Daredevil moved forward across the British land into no man's land. Then he came up to this point here. This is roughly where Hop Alley was, and when he came to this point he fired his 6-pounder guns, and that was the signal for the British infantry that were lying up in this wood to come out and help with the attack. Daredevil swung the tank to the right and went along Hop Alley, firing its guns at the German infantry. Meanwhile, the British infantry came up behind the tank and helped to clear the trench of any remaining German infantry that Daredevil didn't take care of. One of the infantrymen that fought that day, a guy called Len Lovell, had the following to say about his part in that particular action. And I'm going to quote here: "We were equipped with bombs. We didn't have rifles, but if we knocked a few Germans out who were wounded, we had to finish them off with what was basically a lump of lead piping. So all we had to do was keep following the tank, keep peering around the side. The Germans were as terrified of the tank as we appeared to be. The Germans got out of the way, but those that couldn't or wouldn't, well, the tank just went over them and they were squashed." As Daredevil reached Bear Trench, it turned north and came to a spot perhaps 100 yards into the field over there, where it came across Ale Alley, and it followed it north, following the Germans that were fleeing back towards Flers, which was over that way. Harold Mortimer, the tank commander, said to a friend later, and I quote, "I managed to get astride one of the German trenches in front of the wood and opened up with the Hotchkiss machine gun. There were some Germans in the dugouts, and I shall never forget the looks on their faces as they emerged and saw my tank across their trench." Daredevil then headed north to join the main attack. As it advanced through a British artillery barrage, a shell hit the left rear sprocket and the tank was out of action. Gearsman Ewood Dodson then wrote the following to his adopted parents about the attack, and I quote, "We went over almost before it was first light on Friday morning, and our tank was out of action with a shell through the driving wheels within almost half an hour. It was supposed to be an exceptionally difficult position and hot too. Fritz simply bunked, and well he might be to see this thing coming on him in the half light. We got through the redoubt and were well towards the German main trench when we got hit. There were plenty of flames and smoke, but nobody was hurt. Nobody was actually seriously physically hurt and the tank was abandoned. However, Sergeant Davis suffered shell shock and he had to be helped from the battlefield with the aid of some medics. It's clear that without Daredevil, an attack on this position by infantry alone would have cost many more lives. The top brass were so impressed with how tanks fared here that they immediately ordered 1,000 of them. Regarding the battle itself, Flers was actually taken with the aid of tanks. However, the greatest tank victory during the First World War would come a little over a year later at the Battle of Cambrai, and you might like to click on the link above to see my videos concerning that particular battle. Daredevil remained where it had stopped for the rest of the war. There were 2 photos of it taken much later on when it had been cannibalized and so on. The internal shot shows where driver Albert Wateridge would have sat with Harold Mortimer next to him. During the battlefield clearance operations in 1919, the tank was blown up.